Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Tim Mack, defense reporter for Politico. Tim, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Indirect peace talks being held on the conflict right now in Egypt. Any guarantee that Egypt's leader Mohamed Morsi can broker a peace deal?
Right now, there are no guarantees, but what we do know is that the Israeli populace does favor something either like the continuation of an operation involving airstrikes or some sort of ceasefire. Less than a quarter actually believe that a ground invasion would be advantageous. In fact, on Monday evening, the inner cabinet in Israel decided to have a meeting to see whether they wanted to pursue ceasefire talks further.
President Obama spoke to Egypt's leader Mohamed Morsi, saying that Hamas needs to stop firing rockets into Israel. What impact, what influence does President Obama have on this conflict, and particularly the leader of Egypt, Mohamed Morsi?
Well, in fact, he has a lot of influence. Egypt has been one of those countries where the United States has tried its best to exert influence after the revolutions that have changed so dramatically their political landscape. Right now, what we do see is the United States engaging in some sort of soft peddling of diplomacy, not getting engaged too directly, not with any threats or anything like that, but kind of working around the edges to try to ensure some sort of peace is developed. The United States has also sent 3 of their very large ships, these naval vessels, off the coast of Israel in order to evacuate any sort of American citizens who might need evacuation from Israel if that's required.
Based on what we saw yesterday and in the overnight hours, do we have any idea how close Israel might be to invading Hamas in Gaza? What should we expect here, a ground war, or are we closer to maybe a peace deal?
Well, like I said before, there isn't much popular support for a ground war. There's a lot of popular support for a continuation of airstrikes. We're talking about half the Israeli population is saying right now that they support continued strikes against Hamas military targets. But a ceasefire is also on the table. In fact, a lot of former Israeli diplomatic officials are saying, well, you know, the Israeli military over the last 6 days of fighting has taken out virtually most of the military targets that Hamas even has to offer. There isn't much left to fire at from the air. Either it's a ground operation now or we have a ceasefire, and there isn't much appetite for a ground operation.
Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system proving to be a very big help to Israel, certainly even more so if Israel decides to launch a ground offensive. Let's talk about the other side, though, and that's Hamas. Would Hamas be prepared for a potential ground war?
Well, it has fired many rockets into Israel over the last 6 days. My last count is about 1,300. You mentioned the Iron Dome system. It's intercepted about 300, just over 300 incoming rockets. Hamas is certainly geared up and ready for it, but I'm not sure there's much appetite on their part either for a prolonged ground war. The Israeli army has called up 75,000 reservists. If there's a ground invasion, there's going to be a lot of lives lost, and including collateral damage in civilians.
Let's talk about the president's overseas tour now. The president calling the U.S. the most powerful nation in the world, and also using his skin color, actually, as an example of how a nation can change. Did the Burmese people accept that well?
Well, the Burmese people seemed to really welcome Barack Obama. He was greeted quite well in Burma when he arrived. His arrival was greeted by a lot of very excited citizens, and they lined up to see him 6 deep for miles on end when he arrived in Rangoon. Now, he's on a trip that will see him visiting, or has seen him visiting, Thailand, Cambodia, and Burma. And he's trying to exert American influence and try to prove to these Asian countries that Asia will be at the forefront of American political and economic and trade strategy going into the years forward.
The president, the first sitting U.S. president to visit Burma, of course, he was just reelected. Are we seeing the imprint here, the beginnings of a legacy? What can we expect here maybe in the next 6 months to a year? And what does this trip tell us about that?
Well, it tells us that the United States is increasingly pivoting towards Asia. We're not just seeing this diplomatically, we're seeing this from a Defense Department and military strategic point of view as well. The Defense Department is also talking a lot about a shift in resources towards encountering threats and opportunities in Asia. You're going to see the President and Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta talk a lot about that over the next 6 months.
Tim Mack, defense reporter for Politico, joining us this morning from Washington. Tim, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.